Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Program Evaluation Planning, the First Step to Success. My name is Severia and I am the Communications Manager for Transforming Youth Outdoors, also known as TYO. TYO was created to scale the impact of outdoor youth development and transform the lives of youth by providing best practices, tools, and support to individuals and organizations working with youth in the outdoors. We are a free technology platform that enables those in the field of outdoor youth programming to learn, share, network, and build upon your successes. Membership to TYO is free, and you can sign up at mytyo.org. Our webinar series is just one of the many ways that TYO connects you to the experts and valuable learning opportunities that we provide. It is my pleasure to welcome back Kelly Keena and Corey Colvin-Williams from Blue Lotus Consulting and Evaluation. Kelly and Corey specialize in supporting organizations in understanding their impact through consulting, training, and conducting evaluation. Kelly and Corey also moderate our program evaluation gathering on TYO, and as a member of that program evaluation gathering, you'll be able to ask Kelly and Corey additional questions, connect with your peers, and get additional program evaluation resources after the webinar. Kelly and Corey, thanks for joining us today, and can't wait. So, turning it over to you.
Great, thank you, Severia. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks to TYO for having us back and kicking off this year thinking about this really essential part of the program evaluation process. So quickly, we're Blue Lotus. We are out of Denver, Colorado. The lotus symbolizes clarity that comes out of murkiness, and that's something we relate evaluation to. We are a unique evaluation partnership specializing in nature-based learning and connections to the outdoors. And today we're really excited to talk about evaluation planning. We know there's a lot of levels of experience and understanding of the evaluation process on this call today. And so mainly what we'd like to do is share, yes, our enthusiasm for and the value for this part of the evaluation process. Great. So this is Kelly. This is my voice, just to give you a little bit of context.
And this is Corey. This is my voice. All right. So for the purpose of today, we're going to dive into the specific elements of developing an evaluation plan and how to tackle a plan that is both manageable and feasible for your organization. So our goal for today's webinar is to help break down the process of evaluation and specifically how to go about developing a solid evaluation plan that is both doable and feasible for your organization. And if you were on the August webinar that we participated in, this will hopefully sound at least somewhat vaguely familiar. So kind of moving from that, we're going to dive into the actual evaluation planning process. We also hope to talk about or encourage you guys to think about evaluative thinking, how we make evaluation part of our everyday practice, and help you make evaluation less of a four-letter word. If you're sitting here thinking, I really don't want to be on this call today, I have so many other things to do, kudos to you for being here. And it's a really important step for your organization to begin to start thinking strategically about how you want to know what it is that you do. We'll walk you through the process of forming a question or set of questions that help guide you through the process of developing a plan or blueprint to understanding what it is that you do and how you do it. And if you received the webinar reminder email from Severia this morning, you should have also received a link to our evaluation plan worksheet. If you got a chance to look at that ahead of time, it's basically an evaluation plan, a simplified evaluation plan in a nutshell, and it'll we designed it to kind of mirror the webinar. If you didn't get a chance to download it today, it will be available in the gathering space, and then you may actually be able to click on a link in your webinar control panel. Where your chat box is, there should be a link available there. But if not, we'll get it to you at some point. We will start with number one on that worksheet, so kind of move past the highlighted sections, and then you'll be on track with us through the webinar. Right.
So we'll pause and let everybody get that going. And I'll take this moment to share with you why evaluation is so important. Corey and I were part of a presentation to a board that was considering a sizable budget for evaluation. And at the end, a board member leaned across and asked the executive director, "So who are we accountable to?" And she responded, "Well, yourselves." So when we think about evaluation, we think about telling our story. And it's really telling our story based on evidence. It's backing up our story and saying, this is what we do and this is the impact we have, and we know this because, and here's how we know. And when it comes to that conversation about setting aside money or resources for evaluation, it's being accountable to ourselves. It's understanding what's working and what's not, and then being able to take action on it. So identifying what we want to change in our programs to have a bigger or more meaningful impact. But then also, as a community, evaluation builds professionalism and builds up our field with evidence of what's working. And it also helps build understanding and support. And oftentimes this is referred to as collective impact. We see evaluation as a process. When we frame evaluation this way, it's a cycle. And so today we're taking a deeper dive into the evaluation planning process. But when you think about the process as a whole, here's a little analogy for you. When my daughter was little, she would ask a question, and I would think that I was brilliantly answering it, and she would say, "And then?" And every time I answered or connected with what I thought was a great answer, she would say, "And then?" So that's evaluation. We plan it, and then we do it, and then we learn from it and make changes, and then we plan for it again. And then at that and then part is the series of questions that continue to arise between each iteration of the process. And all of this is embedded in our work. So today we're specifically talking about this planning piece and creating a roadmap that includes goals for what you and your organization want to know and the steps that you take to find out. So here's our story and here's how we know. And then reminds us that evaluation does not end with a report. This plan helps us break it down into periods of time and specific questions so we can keep in mind all of the and thens that come up, but also stay focused on the question that we are aiming to answer. Oh, I'm out of order here. So your plan sets your course. It serves as a touchstone or a pulse point. It ensures that everyone in your organization is on the same page, even if they're not directly involved in your work. So saying that again, this evaluation planning process is a team effort, even if you are the only person that is overseeing the evaluation itself. And this creates a cultural norm. Again, here's that term of evaluative thinking, where everyone is thinking about it, even if it's not directly their work. Your evaluation plan is based on your theory of change. What is your organization's story? If you don't have one of these, no worries. Start with the vision and mission of your organization, and you'll notice on our handout that's where we started to prompt you a little bit. That's what's going to inform all of this anyway. The evaluation plan is made up of the components you see here on your screen, and it's listed in the handout that Severia sent around and the one that Corey referred to a few moments ago. So we'll spend the time today breaking it down, working through the plan, and explaining each of these sections specifically. The goal of this plan is to break the process into easily digestible pieces and questions. So we don't eat the whole elephant, which is a terrible metaphor, by the way, but we don't eat it all at once. We take it in little bites. So you may end up with a plan that covers 5 years or 1 season. Be reasonable and be kind to yourself. This plan is shown as a cycle because it doesn't just happen once. This isn't shelved, and it's not just handed over to stakeholders or funders. This is an internal document. Your evaluation plan becomes a living and breathing thing. It's resilient and flexible. So the arrows in the center that are going different directions intend to show the interconnectedness, if I can say it, interconnectedness of this process of planning. It is not linear. Each step influences the steps before it, and each step should not be considered written in stone even after the plan is complete. The plan is a guiding document. And these steps are done in parallel. But the order that we go through seems to be the order that makes the most sense in terms of developing the plan. And the other thing that we just want to make sure you know is we really are enthusiastic about this process, because when you have a map of the territory, you know where you're going. We talk with a lot of organizations that are sort of grasping at things that they think are evaluation. The plan sets you up. The plan sets up your success.
And so, as Kelly's mentioned before, this is really about what your story is. And simply put, that's what the evaluation plan is intended to do, is to help you tell your story. And if at any point during this webinar, this is a really important process. And so if we are covering something that doesn't quite make sense to you, or if we're not articulating it in a way that connects with you, please let us know. And we'll be happy to address that during the Q&A session, because it's really important that you understand these pieces and how they all fit together in this process. So getting back to what is your story? What is it that you do? So if you are out at happy hour, or you're going out to hang out with friends that aren't a part of this organization, or you're meeting with somebody at a conference, how do you describe what you do? You may not use all of the jargony words that your organization has in its mission statement. What are those simple key components of what you do? Why do you do it? And what are the results that you expect to get as a result of doing what you do? For whom do you do it? How do you do it? And with what resources? And so moving along in your worksheet, we move into this kind of space of theory of change. Do we have this in the worksheet?
No, it's
okay.
really just vision and mission.
Okay, so
we're going to do hopefully a webinar on that.
Okay, so as Kelly just mentioned, we hope to do an upcoming webinar in a few months on the process of theory of change. But to introduce it briefly here, because it is an important component on which your evaluation plan is based. Okay, so going back to that storyline, when we do this with these resources for these participants, we expect this to happen. And built into that necessarily are our assumptions of kind of in a perfect world, what happens when we execute our mission and goals successfully. And TYO has some great resources available for helping organizations articulate your theory of change if you don't already have one in place. And it's a good exercise for everyone involved in your organization, and it helps align the purpose and outcomes of your program. So it gets everybody on board, that evaluative thinking process again. And this planning process is how we figure out how and if we do what we think we're doing. And again, you'll want to use your theory of change and eventual logic model to kind of help guide your evaluation plan so that it's all related, and it helps keep you on track.
So an evaluation plan has to have a question. We call these, and actually the Better Evaluation organization calls these key evaluation questions. So what do you want to know? And this is often the most underestimated and overlooked step. In research and evaluation, you're trying to answer a question, and you'll have surprises along the way and results that come up that aren't directly related to your question. But you have to start somewhere. You have to start with something that you're trying to understand about the work that you do or the outcomes that you are creating. So start somewhere. Writing this is the hardest and most important part. But the good news is you can continue to revise this as you move through the rest of the process. So maybe you have a question that you have been tossing around with your staff or other educators in your organization. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have some goals and you want to understand if those goals are being achieved. So at this point, what we'd like you to do is just a brain dump. So write down in these next couple of awkward silent moments what questions do you have about your program or your organization? And I will spare you all my humming of the Jeopardy tune. And remember, as you're writing these down, don't be quick to judge your responses. This is really an initial piece to just get your brains going around what's possible. And we'll spend the next few minutes here really talking about these questions. So keep in mind, oftentimes one question from a brainstorm can be broken down into 5 questions. And so I want to just show you what that looks like. We work with organizations all the time that have questions about their programs that are so jam-packed with stuff that they become overwhelming to think about how we evaluate them. So here's an example of a question. What is the impact of X program and Y classes on school achievement, self-esteem, and literacy for all youth that we connect with? And for some of you, all youth may mean thousands and thousands of youth. And so the next step of this, after you get some questions down, is to think about, now, how do I make these more manageable? So in this example above, the manageable part comes from the color coding. So look at one program on one outcome for one audience and start there. What's your priority? Here's another way to look at that. So you can look at one program and the impact of school achievement for middle school, or you could look at high school, how high school youth talk about self-esteem before and after particular context with your organization. And so we have these here just as an example about how to make a question that you're curious about manageable for your evaluation plan. Now, thinking about that question, there's 3 categories that we can think about. One is process evaluation, one is outcome evaluation, and one is economic evaluation. So process evaluation is really about investigating the process that you are engaged in. How is the program being implemented? How appropriate are the processes compared with some of our quality standards? Is the program being implemented correctly, and how do we know? Outcome evaluation is probably where most of us sit, and where probably the most comfortable place to start is looking at outcome evaluation. And recognize that there are short, medium, and long-term outcomes from all of the work that you all are engaged in. And the short-term outcomes will be the easiest place to start. And I'll talk about tools a little later for looking at longer-term outcomes. But outcome is really looking at, what did this program do? What was the impact on these participants? How well does our program work? And then economic evaluation, we want to share with you, just because sometimes you're trying to understand from an organizational perspective the ratio of cost benefits. So keep in mind that that's another category of questions, thinking, what's the most cost-effective option? Is this the program that's the best use of our resources? And then finally, there's a checklist that you can run your question through. Is the question clear? Is the question simple enough that we can evaluate it? Is this a testable question? Who cares about the answer? If it's, we think about the audience, who is going to care about the answer to this question, and how does it give evidence to the story that we tell? Do I know how to collect the evidence to answer this question? This is a big one. Is it obvious how we can collect the evidence, or are we going to need some help? What kind of resources will I need? If you need help, that may be looking at an external evaluator and the resources there. If you don't need external help, what's the capacity of your staff? How long will it take? And then you can start assigning priorities, high, medium, low, or just eliminate the question altogether. But again, within this planning process, this isn't done in isolation. Look for feedback from your team. Look for feedback from other people in your organization. Get input on this.
Okay, and moving along in that thread, just encouraging you to really spend some time on thinking about what your evaluation capacity is. So who is responsible for evaluation? When you think about yourself sitting in a staff meeting, does everybody point at everybody else around the table? is there anybody who has that responsibility for your program? And keeping in mind what is doable and feasible based on that responsibility and that capacity. And we'll cover this later under the implementation plan and timeline, but we want you to consider the staff time available. So it takes more than one person to conduct and successfully implement an evaluation process, and that's where we get back to the evaluative thinking. Kelly and I have both been boots on the ground practitioners in this field, and we've both had the responsibility of having to conduct evaluation in these settings. And so we know that oftentimes what is in a person's charge within an organization may not reflect the time and resources needed to conduct a quality evaluation process. So just keep that in mind. What resources are available? Is there an evaluation culture in your program? Are you encouraged to participate in training? If you're on this webinar, we would assume so. What tools are available? Do you have any kind of wiggle room in your funding to allow for any incidental costs related to conducting your own evaluation, or potentially bringing in somebody else outside, an external evaluator, to help support you in the process? And what are your potential technology needs for conducting the evaluation? And one really very important component, and in the work that we've done with organizations, is that when you feel supported in your evaluation efforts, there's a lot more potential for success and for ongoing evaluation when you feel like you have the support from your colleagues, from your supervisor, from your executive director.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
And this is a spot in that evaluation plan where if you come to this, if you feel like you really nailed your key evaluation question and you feel like it's, you're ready for it, and then you get to capacity and it's like, we don't have the capacity to answer that. How can you make it more manageable? Don't give up. Just scale back and start somewhere. So because you can't tackle a whole big chunk of evaluation, or big, you can't go charging at one of the bigger questions, what's a small manageable question? So this is the part in the process where you do have to do a little dance and go back and forth to make sure the plan is meaningful to you.
Great, thank you for that. And then as you kind of keep moving forward in that evaluation plan outline, it's really important to provide some definition and some structure around the outcomes that you've identified. So which outcomes need some definition? You will likely need to unpack these things to understand what they mean, not only to your staff, but the different stakeholders that this matters to. For example, many of the organizations with whom we work have environmental or ecological literacy as an outcome, and that's located at varying degrees, as Kelly talked about, short, medium, long term, and we can talk a lot about where that should be placed. But it's important to understand what that means for your organization. How do you know when somebody is considered environmentally literate? What does that look like? And that's just an example, but it's really important to kind of unpack these terms and make sure that internally within your organization you're all on the same page as to what that outcome looks like and what that means. That will not only help you in the evaluation process, but that will help you in the delivery of your program as well.
We actually worked with an organization that put some of their jargon on flip charts in their hallway, and for a week they asked everybody in the organization to contribute to the flip chart and what their definitions of those jargony terms like environmental literacy were. And that's how they came to their agreed upon outcomes and the definitions, and it created a common understanding and language for the organization to talk through, which really helps with evaluation. So this is, if there is, considered a sexy part of evaluation. We feel like this is it, with the glitter dress and everything. So Methods, the methods and tools are where a lot of people want to start. It's really where a lot of people jump in and they say, we want to do evaluation, let's use a survey. So just recognizing in the lower right-hand corner, that's the evaluation planning process. We're pretty far into it before we even get to the methods and tools, because we have to understand what it is that we want to measure. What is it that we want to understand? And so the tools are the tool by which we get to that understanding. There are a few tools that you will run across, and there's a few tools that we want to briefly introduce you to. Again, this is the stuff that full webinars are made out of, but there are qualitative and quantitative tools, and most likely in our work around transforming youth in the outdoors, it is a mixture of both. Qualitative looks at the qualities of experiences, and quantitative looks at the quantities of experiences as a very simplified way of saying so. So here are some ways to discover the answer to your question, which is really what these tools are intended to do. A survey. A survey is harder for a younger child. Just keep that in mind since you all work with youth. And typically go breadth over depth. So if you have a large number of participants that you want to gain an understanding from, a survey is a really good tool for that. Not to say you can't go deep with surveys. So you can. It's just how they are structured. So the construction of the survey is really important. Participatory tools. This means that the youth are involved they participate in the collection of data, and they're aware of that participation. This is empowering for youth, and it gets them involved in your process, and this, we've seen a lot of really great work come out of participatory work. Interviews and focus groups. Conversely, from surveys, these are really where you get depth over breadth, because they do take time. But these are great for youth. It opens up the opportunity to say to a young person, I care about your experience and want to hear about it. Please tell me about what it is that you felt, saw, heard, all of these. What was that experience? And what do you do, what are you doing after this experience? So there's a lot of really great ways you can do interviews and focus groups. Focus groups get a little bit of a bad rap that their kids are influenced by other responses, and when you walk into a focus group, assuming best intent from all of the youth involved, it really is a pretty exciting process to hear kids kind of riff off of one another and hear the dynamic nature of their conversation and what you learn about your program. Journals and drawings and maps are great for understanding the experiences of youth, and of course with their permission. And then, as we discussed earlier, there's short, medium, and long-term impacts. Sorry. Retrospective interviews are interviews with people who went through your program previously. So you can get connected with past participants and start to get a sense of these longer term impacts. So there are ways to set up longitudinal studies if that is something you're interested in, but starting with a retrospective interview of participants works really well. Now remember that when we talk about methods and tools, we are talking about answering your questions. So all of these tools have to come back to what's the best way to get at the answer.
And just to add to that, it's really important to note, especially when you're working with children and youth, that in implementing any kind of evaluation process, it's important to let the children and youth know that they're participating in the process and to get their permission. So really this process becomes a volunteer participation, why can't I say it? Participation, excuse me, with your participants. So it's important to keep their feelings and their wants and needs and desires in mind as well as you kind of move forward through this. But so moving along in the sampling plan, as with the tools and methods that Kelly just reviewed, who is your audience? So be strategic in your sample audience. So those of you who have taken any kind of basic statistical course, learn the difference between population and sample. A great example, recently I was reading the most recent National Geographic issue, and they published a Gallup poll survey that surveyed 148,000 people in 140 countries about their quality of life, and kind of put that out there as how people feel about life. When you compare that to 7 billion people on the planet, 148,000 doesn't even get to like 5% of the world's population. So even an organization with as many resources as National Geographic and the Gallup poll have a sampling plan. So keep that in mind. Don't feel like you have to go out and survey all 3,000 participants, because that can be incredibly overwhelming and incredibly daunting. Know who you want to target for those evaluation questions. So again, revisit those important key evaluation questions that you spent so much time developing, and be strategic in the audience that you're targeting. And when you're starting out, consider a smaller sample size. Within research and evaluation, we call this initial process a piloting endeavor. And you know, it's a way for you to get a feel for what works within your program. So if something like focus groups interested you, start out with a small cohort of 8 participants for one season and see how it feels. See if you get valuable information, and then expand and grow from there. Many of you have also heard of this idea of experimental design and control groups, and we really discourage this kind of thinking outside of a laboratory setting. However, there are approaches you can use to compare and contrast your program participants against non-program participants. This does leave you with a lot of unknowns, but it's a better way to think about comparison if this is important to your program question, again. And so a lot of the great experts in our field we turn to when we start thinking about sampling, and Creswell is one in particular. And Creswell says we can get huge samples and skim the top, or we can take smaller samples and really go deep with them to understand what their experience is.
All right, the next step of this planning process is thinking about data management and analysis. These are actually 2 different steps, but we have them here together to talk about because they do connect. So a protocol is simply a systematic way of going through a process, a procedure, if you will. It ensures consistency in the process and the recording and the reporting. We highly recommend a detailed protocol and developing that with the people who are going to be responsible for collecting information. This is a good part of planning and one you will be very, very grateful for. Don't be tempted to throw data into a drawer, tangible or electronic. You will be sad. You will be sad later. Trust us. And you will spend more time organizing on the back end than you did if you organize it and keep on top of it in small pieces throughout the cycle. Label your data consistently and make sure that you're not the only one that understands the system and the way that it's managed. Again, there are protocols for even managing and storing data. And as Harry Connick Jr. says, back it up, back it up, back up your data. We both have horror stories and myths and urban legends passed down through grad school of losing data, and it's, again, it will make you sad. Okay, so then the analysis piece, understanding that the analysis is probably 50% of the evaluation in general. This is the part where it's really about sense making. We could do an entire webinar on analysis, and maybe we will. We'll ask you for your opinion in a survey at the end of this one today. But for now, think about what it would take to make meaning out of what you want to collect. So like Corey mentioned with the pilot, if you are really turned on by focus groups and you think about, okay, well, what does that mean our data will look like? It will be recording, digital electronic recordings of the conversations, and then we have to transcribe it, and then what? So this may be the point where you ask an expert to come in. And because you're planning, because you're at the very beginning of this process, you can bring in an external evaluator and say, hey, here's our plan, this is what we want to do. They can help you refine it, and then they know what the analysis will look like. So again, piloting it, doing the focus group, grabbing this data that's going to come in the format it will come in, and then talking through what that looks like in the analysis on the front end of this is really important. That's all I'll say about that.
Can I say something really quick?
Yeah.
So in terms of thinking about the analysis piece, and if you're feeling overwhelmed, if that's where you've gotten to previously in this process and you just stop because you feel like you don't have the capacity or the wherewithal to conduct a thorough analysis, consider kind of outside of the box resources. So if you're near a college or a university, there's typically graduate students who are looking for projects like this to get their hands on data analysis and what that might mean for them and for their education. So consider reaching out to resources like that could help you either at no cost or lower cost than bringing in maybe an external evaluator.
Great, great. All right, and realizing in the evaluation planning process on the front end of this, you're thinking all the way to the final report. So bring your person in your organization responsible for fundraising or development to the table as you're developing this evaluation plan. They'll be so happy with you. They will love you. They might even bring you cookies. Think about with them who is your audience for this final report. It goes all, so remember we said it's a cycle. It goes all the way back to the beginning when we said who cares about the answer. So now who cares about the answer and what do you want to tell them that you found? Knowing you're at the beginning of the process and you don't have findings yet, you still are going to have an understanding of what this looks and feels like. Asking these questions up front is going to support the end result of the evaluation and make sure that it actually does support your story with evidence. One example is we worked with an organization and we sat down initially to talk about the evaluation process, and when we got to the final report conversation, the development director said, oh, I just heard from our top funder that they actually would like videos. So that's great. We're at the beginning of the process, and it's a heck of a lot easier on the front end to plan for videos as a report than it is for the back end, where it becomes much harder and perhaps less authentic to the program. So just be intentional with this from the beginning. And remember that the final report can have sections or be entirely seamlessly transferred into a reporting document for your different audiences. So who cares? Remember, talk to your development director and have them help you refine this from the beginning. And then of course, on the back end, connect with them and talk to them about what it is that you found.
Okay, now is where we take all of that planning and we put it into an action plan. This is our implementation plan or timeline. So now is the time where you look at all of the hard work, you revisit your evaluation question, and you think, okay, how much time do we need to adequately answer? And I have that in quotations because you may or may not answer the question, or you might get a different answer than you assumed in the beginning of the process. And that's totally normal. But how long will it take? Is it one season? Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years, etc.? Again, as Kelly said in the very beginning, be kind to yourself, be generous in this space. If it takes more time, it will likely take more time the first time you do this, the first few times you do this, than if you're already kind of well seasoned and have a solid evaluation in place. Along that line, make it doable and feasible so that you can maintain this throughout your organization's existence, basically. And so then what this process is designed for you to do is to assign evaluation tasks to build on that concept of evaluative thinking. So really, those people within your program who have the skills and the capacity to collect data, bring your instructors on board, and don't just put the weight of the evaluation process and the final report on one person's shoulder. Make sure that it's a shared process. Okay, and then as we get close to wrapping up here, we wanted to provide you all with some additional resources. As we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, the Transforming Youth Outdoors has a gathering space, and we have one specifically dedicated to program evaluation. The link is included there, so you should be able to click on the link and go directly to that gathering space and sign up for it. And that's really a space for us to continue this conversation and dialogue with all of you. And then again, some additional resources we found incredibly helpful in our own work that we wanted to share with you for you to visit and to kind of make sense of all of this, to continue to make sense of all of this, both for yourself and as an organization. And if you have your own resources that you've come across, please share those within the gathering space for everyone else.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. And lastly, we're here for you. When we started this journey of Blue Lotus a little more than 2 years ago, we really had an intent to create an evaluation conversation within our field of practice. And so this is intended to be an ongoing conversation that we hope to be a part of and to facilitate as best we can. You can check us out at the gathering space on TYO that Corey just mentioned, and then also know that we do external evaluation work and consulting, and we do support organizations in getting an evaluation plan that is meaningful and relevant and doable and feasible to the organization. That is also within our practice. So please do contact us with any questions. But if they are for the good of the group, we do hope that we can connect with you all through the gathering place so that everyone can benefit from the conversations that we'll have. So that ends our formal presentation on evaluation planning for today. And we left an adequate amount of time at the end here to really connect with your questions now, so we can take some time before we wrap up completely and answer those questions. And I think Severia will come back in and help us facilitate that process.
Thank you, ladies, very much. Let's see, we have a question in here. So first of all, thank you very much. As Kelly and Corey mentioned, we do have the gathering on TYO, which is a great place to go ask questions, have conversations with other people. And the great thing about gatherings on TYO is that it allows you to have conversations also with your peers. So it's a really great way to connect with somebody who might be doing similar work to you already, and they may be coming across very real and similar examples or things that you're coming up against. So please definitely feel free to become part of that community on TYO and also have access to Corey and Kelly. We do have a question here. Do you have sources for scoring rubrics for student journals?
We have examples of scoring rubrics. I'm not sure. I'll have to look and see if they're specific to student journals. But when you think about scoring rubrics, they really go back to the specific intent of what the journal is for. Journals can be used in many different ways to look at knowledge, transfer, to look at richness of experience, to look at sensory immersion, those sorts of things. So without knowing the specific intent of the journal, there are some good examples of scoring rubrics that are out there, and I'm making a note to myself right now so we remember to share some of those on the gathering site. That's a great question. Rubrics are a wonderful way to analyze student work when we talk about journals, maps, or drawings. And I appreciate you bringing that up. Rubrics are really, again, you can have a process where you look at common agreements from your staff of what you would expect over and above to look like. What would you, and score that maybe a 5 or a 3, and what you would expect something that was a little lackluster. You are disappointed. Disappointed is a terrible word, but you would hope for more. You can give that a 1. Giving credit to the student for participating, and then also internally thinking, how does this inform the question that we're asking? And that's where the evaluation and evaluative thinking really kicks in, and is going to more than one team member and saying, what do you think of this? Help me refine this. And then using that as a scoring rubric and refining it over time. So rubrics are a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful way to work with student work or student products, so to speak.
Awesome. Yes, I think the gathering sounds like it'd be a great place to maybe start a conversation and share examples. Aparna, actually one of our previous webinar hosts with us, with the Aparna group, so she has some examples of student journal scoring rubrics as well, so maybe we can all get those up in the gatherings. It looks like would be a great resource for everybody. Thanks.
That's awesome, Severia. I think too, as you all are developing tools that you think would be useful to the community, it is really great to put that out there. And the more we can help each other refine tools and measures and metrics, if you will, the more we all benefit, and then we can start comparing between organizations, and we can start looking at collective impact over time. So that I highly encourage everyone to share, and maybe we'll kick that off in the gathering. We'll kick off a conversation to share what tools and instruments you all are using, and then we'll hone in on rubrics for sure. But this is part of it. This is part of what we have to do as a community.
Fantastic, thank you. Let's see. Here's another one. Do you have suggestions on ways to report on your work as a whole when you have different evaluation methods? A 2-day, 2-hour or 2-day program versus a 2-week immersion program. Do you have good ideas to create a Venn diagram of evaluations?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and thank you for bringing that up, because we work with a lot of organizations who do just that. It's just not one specific program under the organization. It's really complex in what they offer to a variety of participants. Again, I think that comes back to your evaluation question and what is it that you want to know. And part of figuring that out is, do you really want to know about immersive experiences, or do you really want to know about kind of these 2-hour incidental programs that you might offer at a community center, and what that looks like? Really popular conversation right now in our collective community is dosage. So if that's an important question to you, then I think that will be really helpful in thinking about how to form your question and which group you're going to go after. If you're going to go after all of the groups, which is a great and ambitious endeavor, we use a process called triangulation in research and evaluation, and basically that's looking at all of the different components within a program and understanding how they contribute. They speak back to that common goal and outcome. So, for example, to put it in real world terminology, let's say you have a program that, even though it's a 2-hour one-off program or a 2-week immersive program, your goal is still to expose students and youth and their families, let's say, or let's just start out with youth, to nature, to the outdoors. So you have a common outcome there. The way that you will collect the data with each group might look differently, right? So for that 2-hour one-off program, you might just do a survey because you got a lot of kids participating. For that more immersive program, you might use journals or focus groups. And then you come back to the table, look at what each component of the data is telling you, and then use that to kind of elaborate on your story, compare and contrast the two groups and what they're doing. That may have been a more of a long-winded answer than you wanted, but hopefully that kind of helps put some context to what that process might look like.
The other idea is just from a very pragmatic perspective is thinking about when you do your reporting. Look at your vision and mission, and how does each finding support your vision or mission? What is the evidence that helps you tell the story of your organization? And structure your reporting in that way so that it's all funneling into here is the work that we do, here is who we do it for, and this is how we know that it's working.
Fantastic. Another one, what is a good example of a participating tool that a student would be involved in?
So a good example of participatory tools are, one example is called Go Along Video, where you and a participant walk through a physical bounded space, and the participant holds a video camera and then shares the meaning of that space with you while they're the camera person. That's one example. Go Along videos are participatory, and they're engaging, and they turn the frame of the video over to the student and allow them to direct the frame of the video to what they deem important. Another participatory tool is photo elicitation or photo voice. So this is a tool that Corey and I implement as when appropriate, as much as possible. So it's handing a participant a camera, giving them a prompt to take a picture, like what do you want to share with your family when you get home, and then following up, that photograph in a quick interview with that child saying, okay, tell me about this picture and why this picture answers the question of what you want to share with your family. It just digs in to the meaning and the richness in ways that are a little deeper. The work that we do, the word transforming, when we think of transforming youth outdoors and we think of being transformative, it's big work. It's big work that is rich and personal and exciting, and we all have this sort of gut that what we do impacts youth in really intimate and deep ways. Photo elicitation and photo voice, Go Along videos are really great ways of starting to dig into that and starting to uncover that. Another tool is digital storytelling, so having a prompt or having a frame where the student is on camera and defines their experience. Another tool that is really exciting to think about, again in a bounded space, is photo framing. So you give the child or the participant, the youth, a picture frame or like an 8x10 mat, and they take a picture of the mat or the frame framing what is important in that photograph. So it lets them focus, like the Go Along videos helps them focus in on something meaningful in a space. You can use these on youth trips, on hour-long programs, on day-long programs, week-long programs, front country, back country, urban, rural. That they apply in multiple settings. And they involve the youth, which includes this aspect of empowerment and ownership around not just the program, but also what you're finding. And there's a lot of engagement that comes from youth when you turn a camera over to them and say, we really care about what it is that you're looking at and looking for. This is a really big part of our work, and I'm sure, do you want to add anything else to that?
I'm just thinking of story mapping.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a free resource to anybody. So if you're familiar with Esri.com, or you can just Google story maps, they're free online applications that you can use to help kind of build a map of a space or place, and students can add their own video, they can add their own text, their own photos. You can do a crowdsource map, so you can have multiple participants contributing to the map, and then you can publish that either, publicly, or you can keep it within that group context. But that's also another very powerful visual for the students to look at. And in our experience, when you give youth a camera and you put it in their hands, and then they get to kind of build this story and see that play out over time, it's incredibly empowering and reinforces that experience to them again and again.
And know that approach came pretty squarely from the field of land use and design, and asking students, youth, really about where they live and what they'd like to see change. And so that's the roots. Those are the roots of the participatory methods. It's about what is your experience, and then, if possible, if you work in a space that you own the land or you know the owner of the land, there's a lot of questions that you can ask youth at the end of that process too, about what would you like to see change, or what do you want to see preserved or conserved here.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you, Lady. Yeah. Great. Fantastic options and exciting options. Cool. Well, we are at just about 11 o'clock. So we probably, if there's maybe time for one more question if we have it. If not, we will wrap up here. Let's see. Just want to, yeah, great answers. Agreed. Just want to let you guys know, remind you that the webinar you'll get sent a recording link to it after this, so you'll have that sent to you as a thank you in the next day or two. It will also be up on TUIO in our gathering for program evaluations, along with the handout that they mentioned. So if for some reason you didn't get a chance to download it or click on the link during or before the webinar, that will be available as well, and something we encourage you to share with your peers as well. I think this is definitely, as the ladies mentioned, this is not a solo endeavor. So feel free to share this with your peers, with your colleagues, and definitely utilize not only Blue Lotus and TUIO, but your community as well. And we really hope that you guys join the gatherings. I think sounds like there could be some great opportunities for sharing resources as well as experiences to help everyone in this process, which would be great. We do plan on doing some additional webinars this year on program evaluations or next steps. After the webinar, a survey will pop up, and the last question on there is going to ask you, it's multiple choices, what you would like to see in a future webinar. So please feel free to fill out that quick survey at the end of the webinar. And we really thank you guys for joining us today. And Corey and Kelly, thank you again so much for your time and for helping get the ball rolling. New year, start planning.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here.
All right, have a great day, everyone. Thank you.